Hello everyone and welcome back to the Cisco Optics Podcast, where we talk about pluggable optics for networks. Lasers have been around for over 6 decades. Since their invention, they have found their way into many applications that have changed our lives. Optical communications is, of course, one of them, and there are many that may surprise you. There's also still plenty of room to take laser performance to new heights, leading to even more new applications. This is episode 42, and we continue our conversation with laser and optics expert Juliet Gopinath, professor at the University of Colorado Boulder. Here, she describes her research on integrated photonics and fabricating glass devices in the lab. Juliet Gopinath is the Alfred T. and Betty E. Look Professor of Electrical, Computer, and Energy Engineering and Physics at the University of Colorado Boulder. She received her BS degree in electrical engineering from the University of Minnesota and her MS and PhD degrees at MIT. She was a member of the technical staff at MIT Lincoln Laboratory from 2005 to 2009. Since then, she has led a research group at the University of Colorado Boulder. Her current research interests include ultrafast lasers, nonlinear optics, mid-infrared materials, spectroscopy, orbital angular momentum, and adaptive optical devices. She has published 78 peer-reviewed journal articles and over 97 conference presentations. She is the recipient of an R&D 100 award in 2012 and is an Optica Fellow. She served as an associate editor for the IEEE Photonics Society Journal from 2011 to 2017, the associate director for Qubit in 2019, and is currently an associate editor for Optica. Juliet also teaches a free online course on active optical devices. Just go to coursera.org and search on active optical devices or search on Juliet Gopinath. If you haven't already, please subscribe to this podcast. On Apple Podcast, you would click the follow button at the top now. We're part of the Cisco Podcast Network. Check out our blog at blogs.cisco.com and search on hashtag Cisco Optics Blog. All one word, no hyphen, and no spaces. You'll find podcast notes and links there too. For our YouTube playlist, go to youtube.com and search on Cisco Optics. And for product information, go to cisco.com/go/optics. And now join me as I talk with Juliet Gopinath.
So we actually also do a lot of work on integrated photonics. And this is something that I fell into accidentally here. When I got here, Professor Milos Popovic was here. And as you know, he's really dedicated his life to integrated silicon photonics, both the theory and the experiment. And so I think sitting down the hallway from him really helped, because it got me very excited about doing integrated photonics. So again, this is something that our lab really had to build up capabilities, and it wasn't necessarily easy. We have several projects going on. We've been focusing on semiconductor doped glasses. For us, these are chalcogenides. And the materials we have been looking at are germanium and antimony selenide and sulfide. The reason that we've chosen to look at these is because they can be thermally evaporated. They don't have arsenic in them, and they tend to be more stable in terms of...
Why are you trying to avoid arsenic?
Arsenic is really toxic if you evaporate it. It's also quite reactive to the with the atmosphere, and so we find that our arsenic-containing chalcogenides are quite sensitive to the environmental conditions that they're stored under, and they need to be passivated. So, but for us, really, the dream is to be able to do, and I think this is already happening, but when I started, maybe it wasn't, the dream was to be able to do nonlinear optics with a laser pointer on chip. Okay, so I think this has happened in the time that I've been at the University of Colorado Boulder. We were very interested and are still very interested in using this for long wavelength explorations. If you think about sources between 8 to 12 microns, there's very little. And so we've been making waveguides and resonators and also looking at microspheres and also wedges And the goal is to explore the nonlinear phenomena and then ultimately be able to develop sources that can be used for sensing in these regions that are really difficult to reach. The mid-infrared and the long wavelength infrared, it's really difficult to make laser sources there, and so they're often frequency converted. And so there's been a number of like really interesting things that we have stumbled upon. We also have been doing some work looking at 3.5 devices, and also more recently starting to look at Tantalus devices.
So, and this is all related to integrated photonics.
That's
so
right.
With the semiconductor doped glasses, you mentioned on-chip nonlinear optics. So you would deposit the glass onto the semiconductor directly, or would it be like dropped in next to a waveguide or something? How would that work?
We actually thermally evaporate our material. We have a thermal evaporator here, and then we will do lithography. We've been using e-beam lithography, and then we have state-of-the-art ICP etcher for doing the patterning.
Oh wow! So you actually grow it on the semiconductor.
So they're semiconductor doped glasses. So we often grow on silicon dioxide, but clearly if you want to go to, or SOI wafers,
okay.
But if you want to go to longer wavelength, then you do need to look at things like magnesium fluoride or barium fluoride so that your substrate does not absorb or cause appreciable loss.
Okay. And also, but you're depositing onto silicon dioxide, not like silicon or...
So the silicon actually has a really high refractive index, and so silicon itself does not work for us because, believe it or not, the refractive index of our glasses is lower than that.
Yeah, and I was also thinking like the thermal expansion's going to be different, right?
Yes.
So as things heat up, you'd probably tear things apart or delaminate.
Our glasses are amorphous, and so because they're amorphous, we have flexibility as far as substrate. We do end up having to anneal our devices for maximal, optimized properties, but in general, we have a lot more flexibility than the crystal growers.
Okay. And then, so you were mentioning 3.5. Is that a totally different process, or do you still evaporate materials onto the silicon dioxide?
So we are working on the chalcogenide glasses in-house. The 3.5 project is a collaboration with Professor Seth Banks' group at UT Austin. They have state-of-the-art MBEs, and then they do the processing in Austin.
And what does that look like in terms of the device structure? We can design and model a device in either numerical or COMSOL, and we can put in the material properties, and then his group can grow it and process it, and then we can do the optical testing here. But he's growing what, a semiconductor device or the chalcogenide?
So we have roughly 3 separate collaborations, or 3 separate projects. So we have the chalcogenide, which is really focused on the long wavelength. We have the work with Professor Seth Bank, which is looking at 3.5s. And then we've also started a collaboration with Dr. Scott Papp at NIST on Tantalus devices. And so in the case of the 3.5 and the Tantalus devices, we basically will be doing the optical characterization.
Okay. The characterization, but of what? I'm still trying to picture what does the thing that's been fabricated, what does that look like?
So in the case of chalcogenides, we'll design, say, ring resonators or waveguides, and then we'll measure them to look at the free spectral range, which essentially allows us to look at the dispersion So it's essentially like how fast does blue and red travel in the material. And the dispersion is really, really important. If you want to do nonlinear optics effects, you have to go back to your basic physics, that you need to have energy conservation that will set the colors that you can get in and out. And then you also need momentum conservation, which for us is essentially going to be set by dispersion.
Okay. Wow. So one of these topics is actually three different sub-projects. All right. So I think we're in the home stretch. This next one should be number 6, right? Did I count right?
Probably.
Okay.
So we have also been looking at membrane foulings.
That was the 8th part of my conversation with Juliet Gopinath. Next time, we'll get into Raman spectroscopy and freshwater generation. Juliet also teaches a free online course on active optical devices. Just go to Coursera.org and search on active optical devices or search on Juliet Gopinath. Subscribe to this podcast, and we'd really appreciate you helping to get the word out. Share this with friends and colleagues that come to mind when you think of network technology and optics. And leave a review on Apple Podcasts. We're also on all the other major podcast platforms. You may see the Cisco Podcast Network come up when you search for Cisco Optics Podcast. That's where we live, and you can find other great podcasts there too. Also, check out the Cisco Optics blogs at blogs.cisco.com and search on hashtag Cisco Optics blog, no spaces and no hyphens. We also have educational videos on YouTube. Just go to youtube.com and search on Cisco Optics. Thank you for listening. This is Pat Chow, Product Manager at Cisco Optics. The next episode is part 9 of my conversation with Juliet Gopinath. Until next time.